presentation.
Okay.
Should I
All right.
share?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, awesome. All right, oops. Okay. All right, so is that full screen?
Yep.
Yeah, all good? Okay, let me know. Just interrupt me anytime if there are any questions or if there's technical difficulties, because I can't see the chat or anyone. So yeah, so feel free to interject. Okay. First of all, I am really excited to be here today. I got to connect with Brave, I think a month ago now, and I'm really excited by hearing about this community that's being built, not just in Toronto, but virtually as well. And I personally benefited a lot from these talks that I attended through my boot camp. I gave a version of this talk 3 years ago to the alumni at my boot camp. I went to Lambda School. It's now known as Bloom Tech, and I did data science there. Yeah, and I just learned a lot along the way, and I'm just hoping that that I can give you as much practical insight, knowledge that will help make that transition into whatever technical career you're looking to get into, just a bit smoother. Okay, so a bit about me. As I mentioned 3 years ago, actually 4 years ago now, I did Lambda School. It's a 9-month program, and surprise or not surprisingly, even after I graduated, I did not feel very technical at all or confident about my technical abilities. I applied quite widely, and I lucked out into a job right during the pandemic job market. I landed at Towards Data Science, which some of you might know is a Medium publication. It's headquartered in Toronto. Not many people know that it's a Canadian company. So I was there for almost 2 years, and I worked alongside a small team to publish hundreds of articles every single day. And then after that job, I was lucky to be referred to a sales engineer role at Plotly. That was where I began to get more technical, more confident in my abilities, but still really not quite feeling, that I'm actually in the industry and that I deserve to be there. I took a little break for grad school. I did my master's in economic history in the middle of that. And now I'm back in tech. I am consulting full time now. I work for data engineering companies primarily. So companies like Dagster, Datafold, things like data orchestration, CI pipelines, things like that for their developer marketing. And many of the things that I learned 4 years ago with like my writing strategies and my networking strategies, I've realized that they are still relevant today and might even be more relevant today. And it doesn't matter if you want to be a super technical engineer or you want to be a technical writer like me. So my goal here today is twofold. I'm going to outline for you how to write a really strong portfolio piece. Despite what the internet or teachers might tell you, you don't need to have a blog that's like you have a series going, you're publishing every day or whatever. You just need one really strong portfolio piece written out. And then I'm going to demonstrate to you how you can use this one piece to make your job search and networking and interviewing more effective. Okay, so here's how I'm going to approach it. Now, I'm sure you guys are like anxious for me to jump into the practical bits like the networking, interviewing, job search part, but I think it's important for us to understand why it's important that we write and that we put it somewhere online. Then I'm going to talk about a writing strategy for non-writers. I understand that for those of us in tech, we prefer to code. We prefer to work with, our code interpreters, VS Code, like whatever. We don't want to talk about documentation. We don't want to write lengthy blog posts. We even struggle with like cover letters. But I'm going to simplify the process for you to make it less scary, less stressful, and might even be a little bit fun. Then I'm going to talk about those practical tips where we pull everything together and I'm going to show you actual examples from my own life, like screenshots and things like that. And then we're going to cover what I call the last mile, which is often neglected in this entire process. And then we'll close with questions if there's time, and definitely feel free to include questions that you feel might be out of scope of this talk, like what is a technical writer? What is a developer marketer? Like what are those roles are, because those might not be very obvious when you're going through your tech education journey. Okay, so if there are no other questions, I will jump right in. So I saw this posted on LinkedIn last week, and I thought there's just no better snippet to capture why you should write online. So there's this question that's being posted. How do you evaluate a candidate's domain knowledge in data research interviews, right? So this person, it looks like a very credible person, a principal data analyst says, what you want them to do is you want to have them walk you through a project they've worked on and detail the tools, data sources, and libraries they employ and the reasons for doing so. So that's pretty interesting, right? Because it doesn't go into, let's see the data application, let's click around on your interactive dashboard. It's actually, you need to actually discuss at length your trade-offs and your choices in your technical portfolio application. If you follow Patrick McKenzie on Twitter, you might know him as Patio11. He's like very prolific in the technical community. There's something he said that really stuck with me, and it's something I think about almost every day. He said that writing is the highest leverage activity you can do for your career. I couldn't find the exact tweet that this came from. I must have lost a bookmark, but it's something that he repeats many times on his own Twitter feed, and he practices in his own life. He has a very good article on salary negotiation if you're ever interested in learning about that at your job offer stage. So there's a pretty good chance that you will be Googled before your interview. I know that that always happens to me. My LinkedIn notifications start to, buzz, and I start seeing like, oh, someone's like looking, and I wonder what first impressions they're making of me before I even walk through the door. And so having polished work online is a great way to signal your technical competence and your ability to communicate. But I also think it's important because it signals that you are conscientious, right? You made an effort to present yourself professionally and online to your peers. And this is something that many of us underestimate. So when I was working at Towards Data Science, this is kind of a behind the scenes look into how the editorial process works. Whenever you send in your Medium post for publication, we don't just assess it based on a post, we actually looked at your LinkedIn as well. And easily 50% of new authors would have nothing on your LinkedIn. It would be like something like this, it's not visible to a third-party stranger, or, it's lacking a headshot, it's lacking a title, it's lacking even like a career interest. It's someone you would say doesn't exist online, even if they wrote this really great post. And this was a comment that one of my colleagues had said to me when I was trying to debate with her, should we publish this person? Great post, can't seem to find out anything about them. And I thought this is a perfect description for what you don't want to happen, because it hurts your professional credibility. Now, existing online can make your networking easier. When you're doing cold outreach on LinkedIn or Twitter, which I will go into more detail later on, this is very much a necessary evil in the job search process, right? You're supposed to cast your net wide. It's kind of a numbers game. You want to talk to as many people as you can online and make connections and get that referral. And so having something published online will help make it easier for you to open that door and have a conversation with someone. Okay, so now let's jump into what a writing strategy looks like. So this is a kind of a dated screenshot. This is me back during my boot camp. Even just 4 years ago, it's quite a difference I'm realizing right now. So during my boot camp, they paired our group up with a nonprofit in DC. It was a nonprofit around detecting arms trade. So we had a real data set to play with and try to build a machine learning model to detect instances of import or export that looks like illegal arms trading, right? And so the good thing that came out of it is that I'm not sure if our project actually made it to production. They said, "Oh, you did a great job. This looks great. Our team will continue working on it." But I honestly don't know what the outcome was. It doesn't matter because that first portfolio project, which became a blog post, was something that I relied on heavily during my initial job search and networking phase. And I still point to it today, actually, when I'm talking to new clients to show, this is the range of things that I can do. I can do machine learning projects. I can do revising your documentation. I can do lighter blog posts, tutorials for your audience. Now, behind that project, though, was 22 pages of documentation. And I know that when you're working on a project, the last thing you want to do is slow down and say, "Hey, what did I do at each of these stages and why?" But let me make the case for why this is super important, and it also makes the eventual writing process way easier. So once you have 22 pages of something, it's really easy to go back and go, "Oh, hey, I forgot that we worked on this part, which, there was a lot of heavy data cleaning. And so we should definitely highlight that and showcase our skill set in coming up with some really good functions for doing that." And so the process of having to transform that into just 1,000 words, much faster, and we were able to keep all the important details in mind. Even if you think things are trivial at the time, in hindsight, they might prove to be exactly what your interviewer wants to hear. So if you've written research projects before, this is probably kind of similar or familiar to you guys. At minimum, you should be thinking about these different sections. And I think this can be modified for the data engineers in this talk. A lot of say productionization isn't relevant to you, just ask that. But the important bits are you need a really strong introduction. You need to talk about the trade-offs you made at the data collection, the ingestion, your engineering, your training stages. And you want to talk about all the assumptions that are built into your methodology. That could be, why did you choose one warehouse over another? Why one data orchestration framework over another? What were the challenges that you overcame? Say the data sources were actually really dirty, or the initial ones were really bad, and so you had to pivot. You had to combine and enrich your data sets. And even if all the other sections don't feel as strong, you can always lean heavily into saying that, well, because the project was so weak in all these aspects, it actually presents a lot of opportunity for us to take it in a different direction in the future if we had X, Y, and Z. So always end on a more positive and constructive note. So I'm now gonna go over some writing tips that are just good writing sense for all kinds of writing, like not just technical writing. You don't want to bury the lead. So I think a lot of us feel like to capture someone's attention, we need to have a long build up to what we want to say, right? We want to go on and on about, say, the problem space, the company that we're working for or interning with, things like that. You just want to get to the point because I've heard this stat a lot with resumes. Recruiters only spend like 7 seconds on your resume. I don't know if that's over exaggerated, but definitely at TDS, when I was looking through articles, very much was scanning through articles. Today, when I'm doing research for a new client or new project, I'm also scanning articles, right? I'm looking for bullet points. I'm looking for this was a problem, this is how we solved it, this was our tech stack, and this is our conclusion. And then if I'm interested to learn more, I will take a slower pass at it later on. But most of these articles don't pass that test in the first place, right? And this is also a good strategy for dealing with information overload. So many of us are, I don't know, I'm a heavy user of Twitter. So I'm constantly bookmarking things and just not reading it. And that's I'm not going to say that's a bad habit. I think that's just realistic of how we like handle so much information. So it's also important to incorporate things like visuals. Like you want something that illustrates your finding. If you have a deployed dashboard, a GIF of how that works would be really effective. But even if you're dealing with something more abstract like data pipelines for the data engineers, I find that architecture diagrams that have nice colors, not something black and white, actually are very effective and they look very, very professional. They give you a sense of, hey, you know how this all comes together, and you also know how to talk about it at a higher level business friendly way with architecture diagrams. Um, when you include code, you should only include snippets of code. You can do this through GitHub gist, or you can embed it directly depending what platform you're working in. GitHub gists are great because it is available on your own GitHub profile, and it's easy to take that and embed it into different platforms easily. But the point here is that you only want to include short snippets of really clever functions that you did, something that had a purpose. Like you don't want your, your read CSV function. You want something that like, I don't know, shows how you optimized reading in a million row data set or something like that. So to sum up, you want to be information dense and time efficient. In terms of titles, keep it boring. I think boring is great. Boring is specific. So if you're stuck for a title, ChatGPT is actually really good for coming up with options that you can think about. It's kind of wordy, so you want to cut down what ChatGPT produces, but you could say use tool with tech stack with data set to achieve what outcome. Okay, so now we are at the most exciting part of this talk, which is how do we use all this to network? So it's very unlikely that, if you throw your blog post up onto your own personal website or on LinkedIn or on Medium, even on TDS, that your future employer will stumble across it and be like, yes, I want you and I want to offer you a job. You're competing with so many articles out there. It's very unlikely, but that's okay because you don't need your article to go viral. What you need is just something that helps you signal proof of work. So I use this method. It's modified off what I learned from someone else. And I used this when I was feeling very shy. I wasn't very confident at approaching people at conferences. And this was also during the pandemic where there weren't in-person opportunities to talk to people. So a lot of this was done through online venues. So when you want to connect to someone online, there's like 3 ways of doing it, right? You can say, hey, can I talk to you for a 15-minute coffee chat, which is good practice. The person receiving that, if they even open it, they might be like, well, who's this person? What can I get out of it? Are they just going to take up 15 minutes of my day and ask me some very basic questions that waste my time? Or even worse, if you go straight to the point and say, hey, I'm applying to your company, can you give me a referral? If referrals are reputational risks for the referee, right? If you get hired and perform badly, it will look bad on the person who referred you. So they want a way to kind of assess who you are really quickly and whether you know what you're talking about so they can invest either time to talk to you or taking on the risk of referring you on. So what I did was say, hey, I'm interested in a chat. By the way, just 1 sentence description of what you did to what end and include that link. They can click on that link, scan it over, and give you feedback right away saying, oh, not interested, or hey, that's really interesting, but not interested right now, or tell me more, I would love to learn more. And that way you also have something to talk about during your call, right? So say you show up to the call and you're really nervous, you don't know what to talk about. Well, you have that project to discuss and for them to ask questions off of. So I'll give you some more examples of how I did this in the real world, so to speak. So the example on the left is one I did right after I think it was a machine learning conference in Toronto, TMLS. As you can see by the date, this was like pandemic. Yeah, this was online. Basically, this was like me trying to follow up with the context that I made. And I tried to include some credibility about my educational credentials. But the most important part, to be honest with you, was the link because they're fielding people from different boot camps, they're fielding people from their own internal departments. Um, the link was something they could click on and go and see what I've already done so far. Another example, this was a cold outreach example. Like I did so many of these. I would just send them out, and I did notice that they increased my success rate at getting to a call, um, and which then of course was more likely to lead to an offer to refer me on, or at the very least give me advice. And I think I have one more example here. Another cool thing about putting your work online is if you're fortunate enough to work with an organization or even post it, say your TDS, um, they'll blast it on social media, right? So in this case, a nonprofit put it on social media um, and tagged all of us, and I got to retweet it. So if anyone Googles me, goes on my Twitter that week, will see, hey, that's social proof of something happening. On the right hand side, a staff from the company also gave a little comment, which was really nice. What you can do is, which I didn't think about at the time, was take screenshots of these and just add it to your blog post. Why not, right? Like it's just social proof that you um, have been recognized for your work. It's not just you putting up some random project in the world. Um, of course, if let's say you're just doing this own project on your own, like it's a side project thing you're doing at night outside of school, and it's not like someone's going to retweet or repost it. What you could do is that if you use a specific open source framework like Pandas, that's a pretty popular one. But I know a lot of companies like Plotly, Dagster, if you highlight their tool on social media, they will respond to it. Like someone on their social media team will respond to it. They may repost it if it's a really great example. Um, and that might help you gain more visibility through their networks as well. And the last example I have here for job searching with your published portfolio. So this was a follow-up I did after a first round interview. It was going to be another technical interview. I honestly can't remember with who, but it doesn't matter because this was a template that I used with every single follow-up. You know, I enjoyed our conversation and I want to share some links to the projects that I discussed. Um, Many of these interviews, I didn't have time to go into detail on either that ARMS machine learning model that I talked about, or in this case, there was another Plotly Dash web app that I made with a TTC train delays. Like I didn't get to talk about it. This is one way for you to like sneak it in, right? In your follow up. And I honestly don't know what happens on the recipient end of things, but I can imagine that if I was on the recruiting side and I got this, I would be like, well, let me forward this on to my colleague. This seems pretty interesting. What do you think? Right? Um, this seems like a proactive candidate. Let's take a look at the rest of their GitHub. So I want to address like a practical concern for, let's just say, if you're working in a group project, there's always a worry that if you only contribute to a small part of the project, then the project doesn't really count for your portfolio. And this is actually true for the Armstrong project that I'm talking about because there were four of us on the team, plus a fifth guy who was a team lead. So each of us only had, say, a small chunk of original code that we each got to write. Well, if you are asked in an interview, you know, of all of you, which part did you have a specific contribution, then, it would look kind of bad if you said, well, I was only involved in the data cleaning stage. They did all the Python optimizations and web app deployment. It's not because I don't have the ability to do it, but that's just the truth. Um, Writing up the technical details for the entire project, regardless of who did what, is a great way for you to understand all the moving pieces as if you had done it, right? So you have to own every single part of the tech stack, and you're forced to get familiar with the parts of the code that you didn't write on your own. And therefore, if you are asked in an interview, comment on this part. Why did you make that change? Why did you make that choice? You can confidently reply instead of say, "Oh, I didn't actually do that." Right? It's not about being dishonest, but it's about intimately knowing the entire project end to end and being ready to answer when you're getting drilled hard on technical questions on the spot. Okay. All right. So for the last section here, I want to talk about the last mile. I've gotten a sense that Brave has really awesome um, career resources available to you, like through their office hours, where they'll critique your LinkedIn website resume. Um, Definitely encourage you to use that. I use the one at my bootcamp heavily. I also actually try to get feedback from recruiters directly at their booths at conferences. Um, they're getting inundated with cover letters and resumes, and so an in-person meeting helps to actually get live feedback on the spot. But the last mile covers things that I think a lot of people neglect because you've done the project, you've done the write up, you're starting to do all the cover letters and the resumes, and you're tired, right? You don't want to do any more stuff related to networking and job searching. I understand that, but these things really make a difference when people are googling you online. Have a short 2 to 3 sentence bio in your GitHub, your LinkedIn, your Medium page, just something that's consistent across all platforms. Share a way of how people can connect with you, whether it's DMing through LinkedIn. Make sure your connects are open, or email. Try to keep it professional and avoid words that are too generic. So a personal pet peeve that I had was reading profiles with phrases like data enthusiast, aspiring data scientist. Like the saying, dress for the job you want. I think the same applies here. You don't need to say, oh, I want to be a data engineer. You can say, well, I am a data engineer. I built this thing, right? I'm a very junior data engineer, but I am in this industry, and I'm looking for the next stage. This one's also pretty standard. Have semi-professional shots. You don't need like a photographer to give you a headshot. Now you have an iPhone. The profile mode does a really good job, but it's more of having no photos or having selfies is a negative signal professionally. Some conferences that I've attended as a student offered professional headshots for free. I just attended one last week at PyData, and that was a perk that they offered to all the attendees. So that was a cool opportunity to get a good photo. And I would say that don't worry too much about having a personality that's like interesting or fun online. I think we sometimes overthink that, oh, we need to have like a cool hobby. We need to like list something interesting about ourselves. I think it's fine to just get to the point, state what you're looking for, be really concrete, and be succinct. So to conclude, you don't need to stress. You don't need to write a viral blog post. You don't even need a blog series. If you look at my personal website, I've been trying to blog for like 4 years now, and I've not been successful. I only have one new blog post recently, but that's just because like you don't need more than one to establish credibility in the field. And you will accumulate more over time as you become more senior in the industry. Being boring and technical is super underrated. Um, People love when something is digestible and straightforward to read. If you're unfamiliar with writing online or writing in the data science or data engineering space, a really good way to learn the norms of writing is to look up company blogs. These company blogs, they often contract out to freelance writers like myself, people who are really passionate about writing, but also like know their technical stuff. And they often present a very structured way to here's how a tutorial should go. Here's how you talk about a new product, new model deployment. Some companies have blogs on Medium that are very, very well known and they exist to attract engineers. So it's a really good way to reverse engineer what a good technical piece of writing looks like. Off the top of my head, I can recall Netflix was one of them to have very, very good Medium blog post. And try to get feedback on drafts as much as possible. You can copy paste whatever you have into ChatGPT and say, can you make this more, can you clean up the writing? Can you check the grammar? Can you make this more tutorial friendly? Can you make this more recruiter friendly? Like, and just see what it spits out for you. I found ChatGPT to be very helpful for polishing or starting off with a blank page. If you're afraid to start off, you can say, hey, I'm writing on this project. Could you suggest a structure for how I should approach a 1,000-word article? And then from there, it's much easier to start writing. So that's it for my talk. If you have any questions, I'm also happy to review drafts anytime. You can reach out to me at my email, through Brave or on LinkedIn as well. Very active there. And as I said, I'm also happy to talk privately about career paths, non-traditional career paths in tech. If you think, oh, I need to be a data scientist, data analyst, or data engineer, there's actually like really cool jobs that are possible, like developer advocates, technical writers, sales engineers, solutions architects. Happy to talk about all those roles as well and how to break in. Okay.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Elliot, for the presentation. Really useful tips and also very useful templates. Personally, I feel like I've seen like two extremes of bad practices. One extreme is like people just say, "Can you refer me?" and send the resume, right? That's not good. But the other type of like extreme I see is like people are getting too shy. They just don't. They are so there's like just like a wall that we cannot see, and then just like we just don't press the send button, right? Like we're so worried about like how the receiver will perceive our message. We change the message like 1,000 times and then still like deleted everything in the end. That's not good either. I feel like the second type is kind of like is actually not that rare. So yeah, I think writing more is definitely like it's definitely like a good practice. Cool. If you have any questions, feel free to send in the chat, and Elliot can help answer. My question for you, Elliot, is like how do you see this like writing role changes after GPT has been so prevalent, and then the recent like big updates, right? Like, do you see any
Yeah.
like a very big upcoming like shift in this industry?
So it's interesting because I've been asked about how ChatGPT is coming from my job, and that's something that I was definitely worried about a year ago. But um, the volume of work that has landed on my lap has like only increased, and what I've realized is that ChatGPT has been increasing my productivity, and in a very unexpected way. So I've actually been using it to learn how to become better technically. So I don't know if you've guessed from my career trajectory, I would not say that I am a very technical person, right? I did economics, I prefer writing, I prefer social sciences. Like it was very hard for me to transition into data science and now data engineering, like I do not think that would have been possible. But ChatGPT over the last year, I feel like I've learned more trying to get it to explain stuff to me than I have had in like the previous 3 years, which is just crazy to me. Um, and the ChatGPT is good as an assistant, right? You don't want it to replace your writing. The writing is very robotic. It's also very repetitive. It's kind of simple, and it can't think about business context the way that you can. You know why your project matters, how it will help your certain stakeholders, where it might be very sensitive, diplomatically within the company. You can't talk about certain things, and things like that. Like that requires nuance and care. So definitely use ChatGPT. Like I personally, I have a premium subscription. I use it so much, um, but use it to get started faster, right? I think I struggle with writer's block a lot. Like I receive a content brief from a client, and I'm like, well, how do I start? I hate the blank page. We'll get it to say, give me an introduction. 9 times out of 10, I hate the introduction. It's horrible, but then it's like, I have something to edit and then I'm starting. And I think that's true for any kind of project, whether it's like a client project or your personal side project that you're working on. It will just speed up that process for you.
I see. But like speaking from like a bigger perspective, right? Like if we think about like people who are doing the SEO content, I think you do SEO content, right?
Yeah.
For example, like how to become a developer advocate. But
Yeah.
like nowadays I still don't understand what is a developer advocate. I don't know what that like job does. Hopefully you can also shed some light on that. But like for SEO content, like do you see there is a difference between kind of like a professional writer and like say the artifact generated from like a
Yeah.
model? Like do you still see like a big difference, or the gap is pretty small?
In terms of quality, the gap is still huge, especially for developer marketing, because you're talking to other highly technical people who want the details, and they don't want the Python 101, right? Python 101 is where ChatGPT is at right now. It's, I think, replacing a lot of your entry level courses like Code Academy. You're going faster without having going through the whole series of courses. But where I think the industry is going is that Google is placing a premium on professional credibility. So this is something that I've heard from one of my clients. Um, they want to work with me because I have evidence of all these jobs in the industry, and this is in a bio they publish underneath the blog post. And somehow that is what Google is now valuing algorithmically. So companies that are just churning out content, and you can tell which companies do that because there's no bio, there's no author. It's just like it word salad, right? It's like boring. There's like a million keywords in there. They're repeating all the time. They're just gaming the system, but they're not converting leads. So I think there's going to be a separation actually, that companies are going to go after all these, like, it could be people like you too. Like you get very senior in your organization and they go, hey, you've got a credibility. Can you start writing blog posts for our own company? We don't want to contract this out to a freelancer who doesn't have your years of experience. So I think we cannot predict what's going to happen next. Like it's quite counterintuitive.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. And on another note, like you mentioned about like some unconventional tech roles in the tech industry, right? Like can you just list a few of them?
Yeah. For me, I didn't know that sales engineers existed before I became one.
Can you
I was actually, yeah.
here?
Yeah. So they work pre-sales. So you get a lead, and the lead is like shopping around looking for a different vendor. Say they want to buy your platform, your enterprise version. And so usually you do like some sort of demo for the client. There's maybe technical folks in the Zoom call asking you questions about security, authentication, scaling, Kubernetes, like crazy things like that. You learn all this stuff very fast on the job, but it sounds to me like a lot of those sales engineer jobs are very similar. They're client facing, they're technical, but you need to have very strong social skills. So you're a cross between an engineer and on the marketing side. And typically your compensation will include some commission as well, which is quite nice.
Yeah, I heard sales engineer is a quite a lucrative position.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. Yeah, it's lucrative, but it's also safer than just going full sales. Like, because I have a very low risk tolerance. I still want my salary, but it's nice to have a little bit of bump there with an incentive to try harder with a lead.
Yeah, cool. And you also mentioned like a developer advocate.
Yeah.
What does that job do?
I'm learning on the fly actually because I just interviewed for one role. They are the front face of the company. They are like the champion of the solution. So they're doing a lot of marketing. They might do like live webinars, live calls, YouTube tutorials, a lot of blog posts, things like that. Like some people say, oh, they're like influencers in the industry. I think there are definitely a few examples of that in the data world. If you guys know like DBT, the platform, there's like a few, yeah, very popular, right? Yeah, that's my understanding of developer advocates.
Yeah, cool. And any other positions that come up to mind?
I guess like solutions architect, similar to sales engineer, but you're more on the implementation side with the client. So it could be working on a client per client basis. Customer support is also very similar. You're maybe dealing with tickets filed with like your enterprise issue. These are all very good entry level roles to break into. And then from there, it's possible to move into a different position within companies.
Okay, if you were to, sorry, I'm just keep asking.
Yeah,
I don't know if
sure.
there are other questions in the chat. Okay, but I'm just gonna keep asking. If you were to advise us to, open up like a new career track, like which one do you think is kind of like more doable?
A new one based on the ones we talked about. I think you
Yeah,
already have a sales. I'm not sure if you have a sales engineer one yet. I think something related to the sales and marketing aspect seems to me a very good position to get into, right? Because a lot of times with all these enterprise platforms, it's very, very hard for them to find folks in marketing who understand the technical aspects. And that's why a lot of the work gets contracted out to people like me who will go in, learn their repo, learn their docs, and then translate that into content that's credible.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for the advice. I think like some people in the audience are already like good writers, so maybe those are some like very interesting routes that you may want to explore a little bit. It's you never know. Yeah.
Yes, and I will add that those are very good jobs to have part-time while you're studying or on the side, even if you have a full-time job.
Cool. All right, yeah. If you are interested in learning more about those positions, yeah, feel free to connect to Elliot afterwards. I think I'm done with all my boring questions. I'm just going through the chat. Yeah, seems like there's no other questions. Anyone wants to ask?
I literally just asked the question.
Oh.
And you looked at it twice. You're like, oh, nobody have other questions.
Yeah, no, I blocked your message. Probably that's why.
Should I ask or you want to ask?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just curious to know how about the formality of your messages and portfolio pieces. You mentioned that boring is good in some cases, but I feel like I also have been noticing that a lot of tech documentations and those articles like advocating for things, it's getting easier and lighter to read, often like cracking some jokes and memes and stuff. So I'm not sure if that's like you feel the trend as well, or it's just me like maybe looking for those kind of things to read because I don't want to read boring stuff. Yeah, and also it comes to, oh, sorry. I just like another thing is like when you're messaging people, like where do you draw the boundary? Like what's the line, right? Because I feel like a lot of mentees have that struggle as well.
Okay. I would say that there are kind of two different types of writing, right? Like tech docs, famously, no one reads the docs. And I think that you're right. They are moving towards a more personable format so that people feel like it's less intimidating, especially as more and more people get into tech. We're dealing with not the hardcore technical developers, but people who are just coming in and need to understand like, how do I access this API in a straightforward way? But I think that when you're just starting out, and so you don't have a lot of professional credibility yet, and it's hard to build trust with a stranger, it's better to err on the side of being more formal, right? Because you don't want to accidentally offend or be seen as over familiar with someone. It's always good to be very, very polite, like please and thank you, or I appreciate your time. And that's why I think like for that initial one-time portfolio piece you're gonna write up, just keep it like dead simple. When you're further on in your career, especially as a senior developer, I definitely see like those pieces get wild. Like they get funny, they crack jokes. They're using like crazy data sets. Maybe they get even a bit political, but they have way more credibility to burn. And they're not in a position where like they're using that to get a job, right? They're maybe just using that to keep building on their career. But yeah, very good question though. Yeah.
Gotcha. Depending on the purpose. So for job seekers, it's better to be safe. That's
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
And it lowers your stress too, right? Because I kind of like what Larry said earlier, like we overthink the emails and the messages we send out. And this literally happened to me 2 months ago. I waited a whole year to cold email this guy I really admired in data engineering. And so I waited a whole year, and then I spent like a whole day like crafting out this long email. And then I was like, oh, I need to make it shorter. So I made it as short as I could, but it wasn't that short. And I was like, whatever, I'm going to send it. He literally replied in 2 hours and was like, hey man, let's have a call. I was like, what did I do? Why did I wait so long and spend all this time? The busiest people, the most senior, I've realized like they don't care. They just want to get the email out. They want to connect with you and you decide really fast, right? They filter really quickly. So yeah, it's okay to like be succinct and be to the point. Like you're not offending anybody.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, I just posted a YouTube video. Yeah, it's about this guy having his birthday and just messaging like 100 billionaires, including Elon Musk and all the like CEOs on Twitter. You should see how he messages, and I think that's something that it's fun to watch, and also we can learn from. Sorry, I cut someone off.
Yeah, it's me. I have a question, like because Elliot, you have mentioned you are actually serving a lot of clients. I believe all of them are in different industries and have their distinct product services. So I definitely believe you have a very strong like learning ability. So you can learn something and read something in a very short period of time and then turn it into your own content. So maybe let us know like what's your secret of learning something so quick and be able to absorb everything and turn it to something belongs to yourself.
That's funny because like if you like talk to my partner, she would be like, I am the most anxious coder on earth. Like seriously, like it takes a lot out of me to work on something technical. I get a lot of emotional anxiety learning something new. So what I found really helpful is making a bullet point list of the task, and I break it down to like the simplest steps. You know, like, okay, I need to create a Dash application today. This is something I have to do today. I'm going to load the data set. I put that was an actual check mark. Load the data set, make sure it works. And then from there, you just sketch out the rest of the process and it becomes way more bite-sized. That's honestly the only way I've found to be helpful. Another secondary way, which I use sometimes, is I try to work with someone else on a project, whether internally with the client or with a friend. That encouragement and knowing that if I get stuck, they will encourage me or they will take over that hard part can help a lot. So I think a mistake I made early on in my journey is thinking like I have to do everything myself. I have to make this side project all on my own. I have to own every aspect of the code. That's not true. Like it's better to have a finished application than half finished. And if you write it up, the whole thing up, it's like you wrote the whole thing, right? So you know it inside out.
Yeah, just take your actions, start doing things. That's
Yeah.
Thank you.
The anxiety will be there. Yeah, it's just managing it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this event. If there's no more question, I read it like 3 more times. I think it's because Minjia didn't use a question mark in her question. Yeah, but yeah, I think that's all the questions. Thanks, Elliot, for coming and your time today. And I think we all learned a lot. And yeah, thanks for coming over.
I appreciate it very much. Good luck to everyone, and see you online.
All right. Yeah. See you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, those ones.
Okay.
Like they're too late to drop the call.
Probably. All right. Talk later.